Welcome to Fantasia, home of the melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys the update to my Lyrilusc deck. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this. So starting off, we're gonna be playing, of course, with our Lyrilusc monsters. So we're playing 3 copies of Turquoise Warbler, which is really good for enabling our plays. If you control the monsters, you special summon her straight from your hand to your side of the field, and that puts a Wing Beast type monster on your side of the field for you to go ahead and use your Sapphire Swallow, which we're also playing 3 copies of. Now, Sapphire Swallow, if you control another Wing Beast type monster on your side of the field, you can special summon this card out from your hand alongside of another level 1 Wing Beast type monster. And the monster you're going to summon alongside of her is typically going to be a copy of Lyrilusc Cobalt Sparrow, which we're also playing 3 copies of. Now, Cobalt Sparrow, when she's special summoned, allows you to search a level 1 Wing Beast type monster from your deck and add it to your hand, which basically means you're searching another copy of Turquoise Warbler or Sapphire Swallow for next turn. And this little loop of resources is actually really nice, and the ability for you to swarm the field with them is also incredible for making your combos. So yeah, that does it for the Lyriluscs in the main deck. Next off, we're going to go into some of the engines that we play to accompany them. So starting off, we're playing the DD engine right here. So we have DD Savant Kepler, and Kepler is fantastic because when you use him as a normal summon, you're essentially getting 2 monsters onto your side of the field because he can search out a copy of the Dark Contract with the Gate, and Gate can search out a copy of Lamia. And we're also playing 2 copies of Lamia right here, and you can special summon her from your hand or from your graveyard, which is very important in this build because the fact that you can send the contract with the Gate that was used to search her to the graveyard in order to special summon her out. And the fact that you can special summon her from the graveyard is huge in this deck, especially because things like Nightmares have just recently gotten released in Flames of Destruction, and Nightmares can help you discard monsters from your hand to your graveyard in order to get additional effects, like popping your opponent's monsters, or spell and trap cards, or even giving you an additional normal summon. And if you can pitch something like a Lamia, which has more utility in the graveyard as well, you're just getting a lot of value out of your cards, which is something that you need to keep in mind when playing this deck, because card economy is really essential to success. So yeah, that's why I really love the DD engine in this deck. It is much better than something like Evil Thorn, which is not a good card, and it's definitely very inconsistent for a deck like this. So continuing on with our monster lineup, we are starting off with 2 copies of Kinkabio, and Kinkabio is such an amazing normal summon for this deck going into mid to late game plays, because the fact that you can just normal summon it and special summon a level 1 monster from your graveyard to your side of the field. Now the cool thing is that Kinkabio does not negate the effects of the monster that's summoned. So if you summon something like Kepler, you can go ahead and search Gate, Gate can search Lamia, and so on and so forth. You can even special summon something like Cobalt Sparrow from your graveyard and search out a Sapphire Swallow or a Turquoise Warbler, whatever you need in your hand, and then you can go ahead and special summon those out from your hand as well if you have a Sapphire Swallow, and then keep comboing off from there. So Kinkabio is really good for mid to late game, and Kepler is better suited for early game plays where you don't really have that many resources in your graveyard for you to utilize Kinkabio to its fullest potential. Okay, so next off we are playing 3 copies of Jester Comfit. Now Jester Comfit is an amazing card because the fact that you just special summon it straight from your hand to your side of the field is an additional level 1 body on your side of the field, and it's great for just swarming to go for your Link or your XYZ plays. Now you can only control 1 Jester Comfit on the field at a time, but that doesn't really matter because the moment you special summon him out, you're going to use him as a material for something. So that restriction really pretty much doesn't even exist for us. Now, next off, we're playing 3 copies of Turbo Booster. Now, Turbo Booster is kind of like a little worse Jester Comfit. You can have multiple copies of it out on the field at the same time, which is kind of good. But the thing with Turbo Booster is that you have to have normal summon that turn first. It really isn't that big of a restriction. You just have to summon something like Kepler or Kinkabio anyway, and then you can just special summon the Turbo Booster out from your hand. But if worse comes to worse, you can just normal summon something like your Lyriluscs or your Lamia or whatever, and then just use Turbo Booster's effect to summon itself out to get more monsters on your side of the field. So yeah, that's pretty much it for all of these monsters. Next off, I have a couple of techs. They're just one-ofs in the deck that have a pretty good amount of utility that we can use. And so starting off, we're playing 1 copy of Glow-Up Bulb, and Glow-Up Bulb, of course, is just a recurring level 1 monster. If you special summon it out from your deck with, say, something like 1-for-1, and you use it as a material for Link Summon or XYZ Summon, you can always special summon it back out from your graveyard by just excavating the top card of your deck and sending it to the graveyard. Now, in a similar fashion, we're also playing one copy of Dotscaper, and Dotscaper is incredible because if it's sent to the graveyard, you just special summon it out from your graveyard once per duel, and if it ever gets banished, you can also special summon it out from your banish pile once per duel. We don't really use the banish effect that much, unless your opponent somehow decides to banish this card from your graveyard, in which case you thank them and shake their hand, but in most cases, you're going to just revive the Dotscaper from your graveyard after you use it for something like your Link summons. So you'll Link summon with it, it'll come back, and it allows you to Link climb into higher Link monsters, I guess you could say. Okay, so yeah, that does it for the little 2 techs. Next off, we're just playing 3 hand traps, very, very basic, just 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Now, this deck is very flexible with the hand traps that it wants to run. You can run 3 Ash Blossoms like I do here. I just prefer them. I think it's the most well-rounded one. You can also play something like Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird's a level 1 monster, has some synergy with the deck. You can also play something like Effect Veiler if you don't have Droll and Lockbirds and you don't want to go out and get them. Effect Veiler's also great in this deck, searchable by things like Where Art Thou, same with Droll and Lockbird, and it can shut down a lot of important decks in the format, namely things like Nightmare Gokis. Droll and Lockbird's really good against things like this Sky Strikers. It's also good against Gokis. There's so many other decks that like these hand traps cover. I just don't have the space to put all of them in, so I decided to go with the most generic one, and I put in 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Alright, so that does it for the monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the spell cards. Alright guys, so for the spell cards, starting off, we are playing the card that I've mentioned a few times already. We're playing 3 copies of Where Art Thou, and Where Art Thou is like the Rhoda for the deck, except I can search any level 1 monster from your deck, as long as you already control a level 1 monster on your side of the field. So, you know, if you say normal summon something like Kepler, you can go ahead and search out any other card that you would like, maybe a missing Lyrilusc piece. Maybe if you're playing, you know, your Droll and Lockbirds or Effect Veilers, you can search out a hand trap as well. It's a very versatile card, and you just basically get whatever you want at the time out. And it's really good with Jester Confit too, because it doesn't require you to use your normal summon. So if you special summon Jester Confit out from your hand, then play Where Art Thou for something like Kinkabio, you can revive something from your graveyard as well. So this card is just really, really nice. Not limited to once per turn effect, and the only downside is that if you don't normal summon the card or a card with a similar name as the one that you just searched out, you'll take 2,000 damage during your end phase, but that doesn't really matter too much because Lyriluscinias really mitigate like all damage thanks to Assembled Nightingale. So yeah, Where Art Thou's downsides really don't exist for us in this deck either. Okay, so next off, speaking of searching, we're also playing 3 copies of Dark Contract with the Gate, and Gate is important, and it's run at 3 even though Kepler and Lamia are at 2 each, because this can also search out Kepler if you really need to. You can Gate search out Kepler, and Kepler can search out another copy of Gate to help you set up, but most importantly, you're going to be searching out something like Lamia, and then you're pitching Lamia to the graveyard, hopefully for something like your Nightmares, getting additional effects off, and then using this Gate to summon the Lamia out from your graveyard. So that's why it's at 3 copies. It's just nice to have more targets for your Lamia to send, and rather than not have enough if you're really in the situation where you need it. Okay, so next off, we're also playing 3 copies of Instant Fusion. Instant Fusion in this deck is so crucial because the fact that you can summon out your Independent Nightingale, which thankfully did not get hit on the ban list because it's so crucial for this deck, and you have Thousand Eyes Restrict as your other target. That's right. Thousand Eyes Restrict is nice little spot removal, so you're basically going to summon out something like Assembled Nightingale when it's your first turn, and your opponent is going second, so you can get that monster out on your side of the field. You can swarm your Lyriluscinias from your hand to your side of the field, and then combo off from there. Thousand Eyes Restrict is there for if you're going second and you just want to break your opponent's field. So they have some monsters you can steal it with Thousand Eyes Restrict, and you can go off from there. So yeah, Instant Fusion has a little bit of utility in this deck, which is kind of nice, and a bit of removal goes a long way, especially in this format. Okay, so continuing on with the spell cards, we were playing 3 copies of Pot of Desires, and 3 copies of Pot of Desires is so important in this deck because you need the draw power. And if you couldn't tell already, we play 3-ofs of almost everything that we can of in this deck, and Pot of Desires is just incredible. You want to see those cards. Banishing 10 really doesn't matter because you have so many duplicates in your deck, and it doesn't even matter if you banish 3 copies of the same card. It just really doesn't. You just want to see more cards, you want to combo off, and you want to get your field established. Or you can go for the OTK, depending on, you know, how you want to play this deck. Now, the next card that I play is going to be 3 copies of Called by the Grave. It's like one of my new favorite cards now because it shuts down hand traps, and this deck really relies on getting its combos off. So you don't want that Ghost Ogre, you don't want that Droll and Lockbird, you don't want that Ash Blossom to ruin your combos, to hinder you from your searches, to stop you from your plays. And Called by the Grave is just the most essential card in this build, in any combo build, really, where you just shut down your opponent's hand traps so you can continue going off. And we have enough draw power in this deck that even if you don't open with it, and your opponent for some reason is holding onto their hand traps because they're unfamiliar with your deck, you can eventually draw into it anyway, so it's a really safe card to be playing. Now, to finish off the spell lineup, we're also playing a bunch of one-ofs, so we're playing one copy of 1-for-1, that's a lot of ones. 1-for-1 is just great because you can summon out the Glow Bulb, the Dotscapers, you can even summon out something like a Cobalt Sparrow, or Kepler, anything that you really need at the moment. It's a great toolboxing card. We're also playing 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is just here for Glow Bulb and for your Dotscaper. Now, you can also send a copy of Lamia from your deck to the graveyard if you need to, and it's just a great way to tutor out some things from the deck, and especially so that, you know, if you have something like Desires in your hand, you don't end up banishing your Dotscapers and Glow Bulbs and all that good stuff. You just get them out of your deck, special summon them out before you're going through your draws and things like that. Now, to cap things off, we're playing 2 of the most powerful cards in this deck, 1 copy of Monster Reborn and 1 copy of Soul Charge. Now, this deck does a lot of link climbing, so you're going from lower link monsters to higher link monsters. And during that process, you're going to use some of your link monsters as materials to climb into the higher ones, which is, you know, very natural for most decks that do that. And Monster Reborn here allows you to bring back those lower link monsters to your side of the field to help you establish co-links and basically establish a really powerful unbreakable board. Same thing with Soul Charge. Soul Charge, of course, is just so strong. And if you ever see this card in your opening hand, you're basically going to establish an incredible board no matter what other cards you have. Okay, so yeah, that does it for the spell cards, and that actually does it for the main deck. So next off, we're going to go into the extra deck. Alright guys, so for the extra deck, starting off, we're playing a very basic card for this deck, which is 1 copy of Link Kuriboh. This card's getting its reprint soon, so if you don't have a copy, just like I don't, just wait for it to come out. There's no reason to shell out like $45, whatever it is right now, just for a copy for this deck. Just wait a couple months and you'll easily get a copy to play with. So anyway, tangent aside, Link Kuriboh, fantastic card, because you can easily make it, because our entire deck is basically level 1 monsters, so basically anything can turn to Link Kuriboh, and you can keep bringing it back from your graveyard to your side of the field in order to continue using it to, you know, potentially block your opponent's attacks. Now, we're also playing 1 copy of Underclock Taker. Underclock Taker is actually really important in this deck because if your opponent tries to Ibly lock you out of the game, you can easily just normal summon a Kepler or something, search out your gate, whatever you're going to do anyway, and then use the Kepler and the Ibly on your side of the field to go ahead and make your Underclock Taker, which is fantastic because it clears out the Ibly from your side of the field, and it gives you a monster with a down link arrow that you can summon your other stuff under. So yeah, Underclock Taker is really essential in this deck because of that down arrow. The only other monsters that have a down arrow in this extra deck are going to be your Link Kuriboh and your Saryuja. And Saryuja is a little bit more difficult to summon, but it comes up in like almost every game. But it's just something to keep in mind when you're building this deck. And then last but not least, for some of the more generic stuff, we're playing 1 copy of Greatfly. Now, you only need 1 copy of this card. This build is more Link-centric, not really OTK-based, as you can tell from the main deck. So, Greatfly is here as utility, so you can go into it and then go into your Lyrilusc plays, swarm the field, make your Assembled Nightingale, and just poke for a bunch of damage. Greatfly's damage actually scales really well with the number of times that Assembled Nightingale can attack. So, you know, 500 boost, if your Assembled Nightingale can attack twice, that's really 1,000 extra damage that Greatfly provides. If you have 3 materials, 1,500, and so on and so forth. So Greatfly is absolutely crucial for this deck if you're trying to squeeze out that extra little bit of damage from your opponent's life points. Now, you only need 1 copy of Greatfly, because if Greatfly gets destroyed by battle by card effect, you can just take the Greatfly in your graveyard and put it back into your extra deck, so you really don't need another copy of it, and the extra deck for this deck is really, really tight, so you need all the space that you can get. But yeah, anyway, those were like the little toolboxing generic monsters that you can get. Next off, we have some Nightmare cards that we play. So we're playing one copy of Nightmare Cerberus. Cerberus is the card that allows you to discard a card and destroy a special summon monster that your opponent controls in their main monster zone. So it's a little utility, little like Raigeki break that you can use. And if it's co-linked when you use this effect, you can of course draw a card, which is really nice. Next off, we're playing one copy of Nightmare Phoenix. Pretty much the same thing as Cerberus. The only thing is that it doesn't pop a special summon monster in your opponent's main monster zone. It pops a spell or trap card that your opponent controls. So this is kind of like a little mini Link version of Tornado Dragon, which is kind of nice. And last but not least for our Nightmares, we're playing one copy of Nightmare Goblin. And Nightmare Goblin, the same thing as the other two, Cerberus and Phoenix, where you discard a card to get its effect. But you can normal summon an additional time this turn to one of the markers that this Goblin points to, which is actually fantastic. It's incredible in this deck because now you can get those extra monsters that used to be stuck in your hand onto your side of the field. No longer is it like a really bad thing if you draw into, you know, multiple like of Kinkabio and your Keplers and things like that. You can get those additional normal summons, and because Kepler gains you advantage when you normal summon it, and because Kinkabio gains you advantage when you normal summon it, you want to see those cards, and you want to be able to reuse them and put them onto your side of the field with Goblin to help you advance your game state. So yeah, these three Nightmare cards are absolutely essential for this deck and this build, and it's really great that these got released in Flames of Destruction. Alright, and the last two Link monsters that I play is going to be one copy of Trigate Wizard. This is a card that you pretty much want to just summon while it's co-linked to three other monsters, so you can get that Cyber Dragon Infinity type effect where you just negate any card effect or whatever that activates, and then you banish it. And then once per turn on your turn, you can just target a card your opponent controls and banish it. So it's really great spot removal, and of course it's a fantastic boss monster for this deck to sit on. And then last but not least, we're playing one copy of Saryuja. Saryuja, of course, allows you to just draw a bunch of cards. Draw 4 cards, put 3 back into your deck. You can put back some, duplicates that you don't want. It helps you draw into, more normal summons for your goblins. It helps you draw into your soul charges, your monster reborns, those power cards that you want to see. And it just puts back things that you really don't want to see in your hand, right? Things like maybe Glow Bulb and maybe Dotscapers and things like that. Although, technically, if you had those cards in your hand, you could pitch them with your Nightmares and things like that, put them into your graveyard, and you get some additional uses out of them. But yeah, this just gives you so many more options to go into, and just lets you dig for more cards, so you can potentially draw into more combo pieces. Alright, so that does it for the Link monsters. Next off, for the XYZs, we are playing 2 copies of Lyrilusc Assembled Nightingale. And Assembled Nightingale is really important in this deck because it helps you not take any battle damage from your opponent, which is actually pretty crucial, seeing as this deck is a little bit more fragile in terms of monsters. We have very low attack monsters, very tiny monsters that we use to swarm the field to go ahead and climb into, the bigger monsters from our extra decks. And if, you run out of your Link monsters or your opponent's just playing some really oppressive form of a deck, you can just summon your Assembled Nightingales and just kind of poke them and grind the game out. So this game can go from aggressive to defensive and just switch between those 2 modes fairly easily. And that's why I really love playing this deck. So yeah, 2 copies of Assembled Nightingale, really all you need. Again, Greatfly can put this card from your graveyard back to your extra deck if you do need another copy of it. We're also playing 2 copies of Lyrilusc Recital Starling, and Recital Starling helps you search out your Lyrilusc monsters. If you're playing something like DD Crow, it can help you search that out as well, but Call by the Grave is just a much superior version of it, so unless you just really want the searchability and utility of the DD Crow, because you can just banish, spell cards against Sky Strikers and things like that, that's another option you can go for. But yeah, Recital Starling, fairly good. Really good for closing out games, by the way. You can just crash into your opponent's monster, and whatever damage you take, your opponent takes as well. So if you crash it into, a 2,000 attack monster, boom, your opponent takes 2,000 damage, and you do as well. You just closed out the game, because more likely than not, you're going to have more life points than your opponent, thanks to Assembled Nightingale protecting you from all that battle damage. But yeah, that's going to be it for the Lyrilusc monsters. Next off, we're playing 1 copy of Sylvan Princess Sprite, and Princess Sprite here is just really good for digging for your spell cards. Almost about, I'd say about half your deck is spell cards, so you can easily go ahead and dig through with your Princess Sprite. Hopefully you're excavating things like your Soul Charge, your Monster Reborn, things like that, so you can easily add it to your hand, and then, of course, use it to extend your plays. But yeah, that's going to be it for the XYZs. Fairly standard. I don't think anything's changed from my last build. And then, of course, for the fusions, we're playing our 2 cards. Playing 1 copy of Lyrilusc, Independent Nightingale, and 1 copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict. And these 2 cards are instant fusion targets. I explained them earlier when I was going over instant fusion. But yeah, that's going to be it for the extra deck. And that's going to be it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Lyrilusc content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.